Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good ever what time of day it happens to be that you are listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. On this episode, I have the amazing Mark Yeates. Now, Mark and I met on through LinkedIn a number of years ago. A couple of old D&T teachers who have been in and out of the classroom, around the block a couple of times, and Mark does some amazing things up on the sunny coast. So, Mark, welcome to the Tattoo Teacher.
Great to be here. I'm looking forward to it. Sounds like we can have a bit of a chat and a bit of a wander through times, and things have changed over the years. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation around how that's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mentioned that you've been in and out of the classroom. So you've been in business, in industry, but what is your reason? What's your why for coming back to the classroom?
Oh, look, I've always been in the classroom to a degree. I've been a teacher now for 30 something years, but I over the years, one of the things I've really recognised, I guess, is that I um, have realised that how important the industry aspect of what we do is, and I think that's really hit home with me in the last 15 years, and right down. I'm teaching year fives and sixes now in Onshape and a range of those things, which I wouldn't have even dreamed of probably 10 years ago. So and I'm seeing the importance of why that's so critical. Because it helps the kids connect their literacy and numeracy to real objects and real things, real tangible stuff. And a lot of the other teachers are finding that as well. So they rock up with their key tag on their bag and they can have a conversation about what they've just done in English or maths from two different contexts, because that key tag has, and it seems so simple, like it's a key tag, right? And one of the things I'm finding is that I can do that key tag every single year from year 5 right through to year 10, and the things that the kids talk about are markedly different in each of those year groups. We start with just the fact that we managed to get the software switched on in year 5, and logged on, right? Like that's where we start. Like it sounds ridiculous, but web-based software isn't an easy thing to just get signed into. And I know there's teachers out there who are struggling with that as well, Phil. And I think that's the battle for us as teachers, is recognizing that we need to share that battle with the kids. It's okay to be in a position where we're all learning together. Let's jump on and make some mistakes. And nowadays I say to the kids, I've spent 35 years of my life making mistakes. That's why I'm so good at what I do, is because I've made so many mistakes and I still make them. And I think that's a really critical thing that and that continues right the way through after school. And again, that's the connection between industry and school, is that it's life, right? As we get older, and you and I are probably getting towards the end of our careers, I guess, with 15, I've got 10 years to go, but, and the reality of that is sharing that with both kids and younger teachers, giving them the confidence to go, it's okay for me not to know, and we can learn this together. And I think that's a really critical thing, no matter what you teach, whether it's maths, science, English, humanities, doesn't really matter to me. So I guess that's one of the things I've been connecting and getting industry people in to give permission for teachers to do that. Like it sounds silly, right? But it's okay for us to not be the font of all knowledge anymore. And I think the concept of knowledge has changed over 30 years. The things we used to think of as knowledge came out of textbooks and kind of solid, libraries were a place where you went to get knowledge. Whereas now you can get it on your phone in 25 seconds. What you used to have to get a bus trip to go to the library, and you get a coffee on the way to the library. It was a half a day trip to go and get some knowledge. Whereas
100%.
now we've got it on tap, right?
Yeah, it's there, and it's one of those things, like you said, we teachers and especially like you said, we're sort of coming to the back end of our careers now in the classroom.
Yeah.
But everything that we've learned is through trial and error, through making I can't tell you how many mistakes. asking for help, asking for advice, talking to people who have done the project, reading books, and like some of the reference material that I use now, it was written 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's still relevant. Kids can access it a little bit quicker, but even then, some of the stuff that's in these books isn't accessible to the students. So it's almost that they're missing out on the ability to gain certain parts of the knowledge that we've learned over the years.
Yeah. I found something really interesting. I've just someone on my LinkedIn account again has just reached into me in the last few days, and you probably saw the comments actually, because I know you follow some of the stuff I throw up there. But a fella up north has decided he wants to do a bit of Onshape, and he reached out to me, and we gave him the Onshape website. And one of the things I find really interesting is you give people the step-by-step instructions that are either on YouTube or wherever you choose to get them from. Onshape has a great, and I think, I don't think it was even me. I think one of the guys from the grammar school got on there. But Justin got on there before me and sent the Onshape site to him, which was great. And it's one of the great things about LinkedIn is we can share that, common knowledge. But what I found really interesting with that was, and I found this running shoots here at the university as well for teachers just doing day lectures on how to implement Onshape, is that it's often not the things that is in the videos which people struggle with. It's actually the things that aren't in the videos. And that's the bit that is hard for teachers, is that, as I said, the sign-up process, there isn't a place where you can go to go, how do I sign up a group of 30 kids in 20 minutes on Onshape? Try finding a video that tells you how to do that. There isn't one, right? So having a conversation with the teacher who's done it is going to sit there and go, look, it's going to be stressful. There's no way of stopping that. But there are some things you can do. For example, use their first name, a colour. You can give them the colour, blue, and the year that we're currently in, because it's got to be a 10-digit number, right? So that's a little trick that you can use so that everybody has similar passwords, right? So again, once people know those little tricks, it becomes way easier for you to log on a whole class full of kids, and they're the little bits and pieces that, only making the mistakes is going to teach it, like walking in there and trying to get, 30 year fives onto Onshape in a lesson your lesson is gone. Like, that's it. We're done here. You got 50-minute lesson. That's it. That's all you're going to get done today. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I've had 50-minute lessons with year 10s trying to get onto, I've been fortunate that where I'm at currently we use the Autodesk suite, but even then, that has the same sort of struggles. I've used other, been at other schools where we've used Fusion. Again, it's Autodesk, but it's the online version, and then it's just like, where does this time go? So it's learning those mistakes, or learning from those mistakes, that makes it easier, and then we can pass on the knowledge. And I think it's great for kids to see us make mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But more importantly, how we recover from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look at the other thing is, people can go, well, what platform do you use and what, hardware do you, I don't really get excited about all that stuff. Because like you, I've used all of those softwares I've spent time on and used, and Onshape was the last one, because the new school I've just started at beginning of last year, they used Onshape. So I went, okay, picked up Onshape, and really they're all very similar. Like, the interfaces all work the same. The way in which you use them with a mouse all works the same. As long as you set up your measurement at the beginning, everything else kind of plays okay, and Onshape is a bit quirky, because it won't let you, when you reset your measurement, it only resets it to the default for that particular drawing, and then it goes back to the default you originally set, which is a bit annoying. But they're apparently fixing that in the next version, which will be great. So when you change the default on one drawing, it changes everything in all of the background, which, again, but that's just user feedback, right? And again, this is something I think we as teachers haven't historically been really good at, is that we talk about, we do our classes, and then we walk out the door and we don't think about the product developers. right? So
Yeah.
we can't expect them to change to help us if we're not giving them the information to help us in the classroom. So I think some of those things are things that we need to really, and like I was telling you before we got on camera about, frame and how I've been learning that over the last probably 2 years. And one of the things that Gabe and I have become quite good friends because I give him so much feedback. He gets back on LinkedIn and goes, "Oh, thanks very much. I didn't really think about that from an education viewpoint." And those things are really important, those conversations. So sharing that stuff on platforms like LinkedIn and making sure you tag in Onshape or you tag in Inventor or, Autodesk, or you tag in those companies is actually pretty important because it's how we get our feedback loop going with the product, not just the kids.
Yeah, and I think, look, I've, like yourself, we've dealt with ed tech companies for a long time.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, a number of them don't actually, they're making products for us and our students, but they don't talk to us.
No.
They just think, oh, well, here you go and buy this. It's shiny. And it's just like, hold on, talk to us. Tell us, ask us what we actually want and what features and all this sort of stuff. And I think teachers get so frustrated with the fact that they're just thrown something that actually doesn't fit it's not fit for purpose.
No. Well, it's not fit for education. And I think we started this conversation because we talked about industry, right? And I think that's a really, really important point is that the software is often not designed for education.
Yeah.
Right? It's designed for industry. So we have to keep that in mind as well. And I think teaching, I probably should have said earlier, I teach both across 2 syllabus documents now. I teach digital literacies as well as the design literacies. And one of the things I'm finding really interesting now teaching both those subjects is the literacy dynamic between the two is actually quite different. Whereas I think most of us think it's very similar. But there's 2 quite different language types that you have to use between digital literacies and design literacies within the 2 subject strands. And that's something I'm finding really quite fascinating teaching the younger kids over the last 2 years, year and a half, which is where at the new school I'm at, I've taken on 5s and 6s. I now teach all of year 5 and all of year 6 for their year of digital and design technology, which has been it's going to be a really powerful thing because we know by the end of year 6 that every single one of those kids has got a certain skill platform, and one that's I've been doing it a while, so we know that the kids are at a particular level, but we also know the kids who are struggling with it, and the only downside to that is we get a new cohort of kids in year 7 coming in from other schools, where we have to do quite a lot of work at the beginning of year 7 to bring those kids up to the same standard as our 5s and 6s that have been doing design and dig for 2 years.
Yeah, because look, I've noticed over the years that it's when students come in, these children come into my classroom. Some are like up here ready to go. Others they've hardly turned on a computer.
That's right.
Or they know about they've used screens, they've used devices, but they've not done anything really technical. They've used it as a viewer, and so there's this huge disconnect between the primary years and then the secondary years, and it's like you've got kids racing ahead. You've got kids you're trying to pick up, and I guess where you are now, you have that, an advantage. Because you can actually taper them right straight into high school with the skills that they need. And sometimes as well. I mean, you probably know this as well, but the difference between stage year 6 and year 7, it's like we actually treat them as though they don't know anything.
Yeah.
And these kids get frustrated and we wonder why they turn off high school.
Yeah. I mean, the other side of it is that a lot of them have siblings, right? So But if they've got siblings who are a year or two older and they've been in your class and they've got the software on there, they're already learning what they want to do before they get to your classroom because their siblings have already taught them.
Yep.
And one of the things I say to those kids is I just tee them up straight away as my helpers, right? And they become, teachers for all intents and purposes because they are in my room and I go, you know what, if you know what you're doing, either just get to it and you go to the next stages. But I do never let kids go to the next stage without having finished one stage. So I was talking earlier about, and I can't remember if it was on camera or off camera, about the importance of doing the same task every year. And it's this concept, and I talk with, when I have pre-service teachers, one of the things I spend a lot of time getting them to understand is that you can't run until you can walk. And the concept of making sure you start every class with a walk, because you need to know that your kids are connected when they walk in the room. And I think that can be a real trap with some of our subjects, whether it's woodwork or metalwork or machining in year 10, the assumption that kids know stuff. And I think the worst thing we can do with digital technologies is exactly that. We make the assumption that our kids can carry a mobile phone, so therefore they should know how to save a folder.
Oh,
They
no.
don't.
No,
They don't.
And so many adults, so many parents, so many teachers just go, well, why can't you save it there? So,
Yeah,
and I mean, I
absolutely.
know for years we've, part of being in the design and tech faculty, especially down in New South Wales, we had to teach digital technologies.
Yeah.
That was part of the technology and applied subject.
Umbrella. Yeah.
So, first couple of weeks of year 7 is, okay, let's teach them file storage. Let's teach them how to create a new folder, how to back up onto a server, how to make sure that you don't just save it on your desktop because your computer's going to die and then you're going to lose all your work. And yeah, kids have grown up now with a device in easy access.
Yeah.
And just because someone used that term digital native.
Yeah.
They know how to scroll. They know how to use it as a viewer, but they don't know how to use it. They can't use Word because they've never been taught how to use it. They can't use CAD because they've never been taught how to do it. So
no, it fascinates me whenever I have a senior class. The first unit I do with them is how to get all their information onto their phone. So that's the first unit I do in every senior class. Is you've got a laptop, but how do you access your laptop or the information you've got on your laptop or on your phone? And they all look at me like, I've got my laptop. And I go, yeah, but you don't, right? Because when you're sitting in the bus and you're mucking around on your phone, what should you be doing? You should be doing your senior assignment, right? And the data for me, and to a degree, my neck gets a bit prickly and I get a bit red under the jowls and I get a bit fiery when people start talking about kids and screen time, right? Because it's not about screen time. It's about what they do with that screen time. Okay?
Exactly.
It's about the mechanisms that we have in place to make kids understand the why behind screen time, not just about, I mean, look, we can all carry on about data and screen time. That we all spend too much time on our damn screens. That, like, you and I probably spend too much time on our screens. But at the end of the day, and humans have been doing this for decades. Like when writing first came out, I'll bet you $1 million everybody was writing for the first, however long writing was a thing, and then when you changed from writing on a slate with a slate pencil to a paper, everybody wanted to use paper, and now we've moved from there, we've moved to the next. And I think understanding those changes and cycles as an educator is very hard until you've taught through a few, right? You and I mean, you're like me, mate. We started on a chalkboard with big chalk rulers with wire up either end, sliding a massive piece of timber up and down a chalkboard, trying to draw. perspective drawings, or maybe I'm showing my age, but
No, I'm there with you.
yeah, right, and using 5 different colours of chalk to make sure that the perspective looked good when you slid and then you'd slide it down and you have to lift it out so you didn't smudge the chalk as you came down the board. Is that this was a different time, and then we went to whiteboards, and now we're on digital, and it's a really interesting for me, it's been a really interesting change for teaching, let alone for the kids and their journey, what they got out of it. And my teaching has had to change, because I find myself now, like I can do a key tag in probably 15 seconds, but that needs to be taught over 4 lessons.
Yeah.
Right. And here's real, because we've designed a tool that works really well for us to do a process, but it doesn't make the learning happen any faster. Do you see what I'm? So
absolutely, yeah.
It's hard. It's interesting. I think we did the same thing with bandsaws, and we did the same thing with drop saws, and we did the same thing with all those tools that we've had over time. We've eliminated the length of time we taught stuff because we thought the tool was making it faster. And in reality, it actually doesn't change the learning time. What it does was it changes the depth of learning. And we need to spend that time with the kids doing the deep learning. And I think that's been a real kind of learning of the last probably 4 or 5 years. And AI is the next generation of that, if we want to get onto AI. Like I don't see AI as anything different to any other tool we've ever used. I watch a lot of what goes on in LinkedIn. Again, it makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck, and a bit of that, because I just don't see it being the golden bullet that everybody thinks it's going to be. What it goes in is what comes out. I mean, it does give us a better average. Like if you're looking for average data, then great. In design and senior design, when you're looking for average way of doing something, plug it in there, you're going to get it straight away, right? But if you're looking for either end, you're not going to get it out of AI. You've got to do that yourself,
Yeah, and you're right. It's another tool in our arsenal, and albeit a powerful and quick tool.
It is,
and it can do some amazing things. But so can so many of the manual tools that we use. It speeds up the process, but unless you understand the process, you can't correct the outcome, because it spits out, like you said, a pretty accurate average answer, but unless you know your content and you know what's happening, you can't actually enhance what you're doing. So,
and I think I found it really interesting. I've been using it probably 2.5 years now, but I use it pretty regularly in the classroom, depending on which. Like at my old school, I used a different one, and now I'm using a version called Perplexity. It's all written on ChatGPT 4 anyway, but and one of the things I find fascinating about it, in terms of is that it seems to be teaching the kids literacy pretty damn well. It makes kids think about the prompt, and you can use it to teach kids how they should build a sentence because of the way they put their prompts in. If you put the prompts in the wrong order, then it sees that one thing more important than the next. And it's quite fascinating the way it actually will teach you how to write a sentence if you use it correctly.
Absolutely. And question it like we do with students. Like we ask them something, it spits out some information, and if it's not what we're actually wanting, we ask the question in another way, or we ask the question with slight tweaks. And so, because we've got that experience of being able to draw information out, in a way, like you said, it's teaching the students how to draw the information.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of teachers, I think, just because we're in that digitech, design tech sort of world, that we're aces at it. And I've actually said to a ton of English teachers, language teachers, I said, you guys will actually be a lot better at pulling information than I am, because you understand grammar, you understand writing correctly, you understand how to write a proper question. So, and they look at me like, really? have a go. And
Yeah, absolutely. And you're spot on. And I think one of the really interesting other kind of, I've been playing with some of the video and a whole range of different stuff, animation and bots and, but it's quite fascinating when you start to build bots from the other side. So I'm using the same prompting to get the bot to do what I want it to do for its audience as I'm using to get the information out of a ChatGPT prompt. So by teaching the kids how to use ChatGPT prompts correctly, you're actually teaching them how to create good quality back-end prompts for a bot to answer questions for an audience. So there's a whole heap of, do you get what I mean? Like, there's secondary learning going on and we don't even know we're doing it. So it's quite fascinating, again, from that viewpoint, is there's things that I'm sure teachers aren't aware we're doing. And it's like, when you go to the syllabus document and you read one of the criteria and you go, oh, am I doing that? And then you start to go, okay, I'm going to break this down onto what, and you go into the breakdown of what it should be. And you go, oh, God, I did that 263 times yesterday. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely, yeah.
You go, I didn't really realise I was doing that criteria, but when you go in and you look at I can't think of the elaborations, you go, oh man, I've probably overdone that, right? Because we're talking that so much that we need to move off that and move on to something else. And it's one of those things about starting to get to know your elaborations and starting to get to know, like you probably like me, and you kind of have the elaborations flashing through your head like the scrolls of Star Wars. It's
it's just there.
It's a bit sad, really, but that's the way you get after a few years. But it's quite fascinating when you really sit and break it all down and you look at how many times you cover this stuff. And I guess the flip side of that is one of the things that is slowly but surely killing teaching, in my opinion, across the board, is how much paperwork we're having to do to justify what we're doing in the classroom. And that to me is very sad. But I think what we have to recognise is that our teachers, generally speaking, are covering the ACARA stuff if they're looking at those general criteria and they're reading those things and they're going, this is what we want to hear. They're actually covering the elaborations pretty much daily. But how you record that is another whole, should we be running live cameras in the room? Because by the time we run the live cameras, it proves that we've all done every single one of those elaborations in every single lesson we've taught over the entirety of the year. And it's a really interesting, I run the diaries now. I don't know if you've seen those or heard me talking about them on LinkedIn, but they've become I don't do any formative testing anymore. I do, the formative testing is the diary, what exists in the diary at a particular time points. And the summative assessment is that I get in there every weekend and I mark every single kid's diary. I mean, it's 4.5 hours of my life I'll never get back. But at the same time, what it gives the kids is the feedback loop that they desperately need to get better at what they do. And they're live documents, so I can access those through Teams. And that's one of the really powerful things about getting kids involved with digital technologies, is that you've got live documents that you can use anytime, and the kids can be in there at the same time as you. So you're making a change on the weekend, and they're actually in the document at the same time you are watching what you're doing, which is absolutely brilliant. You can't ask for better than that, and it's part of that relationship stuff that I'm massive on. If you know any of my stuff, I'm a big Maslow before Bloom's fan. So it's one of those things that we have to build those relationships, and I think the digital stuff allows us to. And as hard as it is for us oldies, me included, I hope my daughter doesn't mind me saying this, but she met her partner online, and that's not something I even dreamt of.
Nah.
It's not even, I don't even know how that works, right? But the reality of it is, if you can meet your partner in a space where you're not together, then we are actually building relationship by doing this digital back and forth. And I think that's something that teachers need to understand too. we can't be shutting our emails down going, I'm not doing emails over the weekend because I'm too busy. Well, if a kid's going through a tough time at home and they're really wanting to connect with someone other than their family, and they get an email from you saying, "G'day, how are you?" It could be life changing, right? So
Yeah.
we, they're the balances that we have at the moment, and we had COVID about 2.5, 3, 4 years ago now, and
Yeah,
they were
5 now.
that's 5, is it? Yeah, 5 years ago. I've got to tell you a funny story. I hope it's okay to tell, but
Absolutely.
I'm standing in my year 6 class last Wednesday, and one of my kids walks up to me and goes, "Mr. Yeates, you must be a really good teacher." I said, "Oh, why is that?" She said, "Well, you taught my dad." And I went, I nearly died. I went, that doesn't necessarily make me a good teacher. I sort of thought to myself, crikey, where are we headed with this? Anyway, it turned out all good. Dad was a good student, so it worked out fine. But I thought to myself, oh, this could go pear shaped real quick. If it's one of the kids I suspended while I was a year coordinator, or worse still, I thought, oh, this is going to go the wrong way. But it didn't end up going the wrong way, so it was good. But that's how long I've been teaching. Generations are catching up with me, so but it's a lovely thing, and it keeps me going, right? At the end of the day, I'm going back tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to retiring as a teacher, really.
Yeah, look, I get that, and I get the Maslow over Bloom's. I mean, for me personally, I look, I learnt the stuff. You incorporate it whether you understand it or not. It just
Yeah,
goes in
absolutely.
because
Yeah, you
it's
do.
it's just part of it. But for me, as an educator, and I guess for me as a person, it's about relationship.
Absolutely.
Because if you build that relationship, especially with young people, you can make or break them.
Yeah,
You can change the directory of their schooling. But if you don't build that relationship, they're not going to learn from you.
yeah,
And I've said it a few times, and I'm not sure, I can't remember where I initially heard it, but it's something that I've incorporated into my teaching. Is that I have to build relationships so I can give praise to these students,
yeah,
because if I don't give praise, if I don't encourage, if I don't, try and lift them up, I can't then give them negative feedback,
yeah,
because then all they're going to hear, if I just give them negative, 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 one, they're not going to hear it. They're just going to turn off. But if I encourage and correct, when I do have to give something that they appear to be that might be negative or they feel is negative, they're actually going to take it on board because they know I'm there for the good and the bad.
yeah.
And as you and I know, we've got 30 seconds with a kid, and that's it.
Yeah. I think also, look, I don't know how much you know about me, but when I first started, I taught in the jail. So I started out down in Boys Town in Beaudesert, and I arrived down there, I don't know, 94, I think, 90, yeah, something like that anyway. And they were still on the tools, they were still doing chisels and whatever else, and I had kids stabbing each other, and it was pretty intense, yeah. As you can well imagine. So I
Yes.
made a meeting, and I was a pretty young buck, and I came up with this plan, and I sort of thought to myself, and it ties in with what you were saying, and it really taught me some valuable lessons, I think. And I was very lucky because I look back on it now, and there were so many things from a risk viewpoint that could have gone pear shaped. Like, you would never do this in today's climate. But if you go back to 1994 and the sort of climate that was around at the time, I made the decision to shut down the workshops and take the kids and get 4 chainsaws, and I had 8 kids in my class, which may seem like a small class, but when you're talking kids are all ward of the state, these are pretty serious offenders. So I'll tell you another story in a second to point that out. But we took the chainsaws down the creek, and I remember the boss saying, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I said, "Look, it's the only way to get value and allow the kids to get positive feedback on what they're doing." And it ties in with exactly what you were just saying. They were all in a classroom banging chisels into timber, and they weren't getting any success. And what I wanted them to get was success. And I thought to myself, how can I do this? And we had at the time, there was a local fete that ran every Sunday in Beaudesert. And I thought to myself, I went down there one weekend and they had these polished clocks, which were just quarter sawn timber, all beautifully polished. And I thought, there's nothing in that a kid can fail at. I went, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take the kids out. I'm going to get them to cut the timber down. I'm going to get them to dry the timber. I'm going to get them to sand the timber. I'm going to get them to polish the timber. And we're coming back to these markets in 6 weeks' time, and we're going to sell a product. And you should have seen these kids' faces. They couldn't. I've since, 15 years later, I've seen these tables at the markets up here at Yamundi. The same tables we built down at have been resold and ended up at the Monday markets. So it's fascinating to me how that stuff kind of is so important. To the kids though at the time, that was something they were having success with, and they went to the markets and they sold their table for a value of $15 or $20 or whatever. The smiles on their faces at that point in time, I didn't need to mark them. I could have walked away at that point. And I think that's a really critical thing about why we do laser cutting and 3D printing now, is because we get a product out of the back end which gives a kid a smile.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important, and we as teachers,
absolutely.
And it really helps. I know it sounds, some of the teachers who are more old school and will go, oh no, they should be on the tools, and I'm going, I'm teaching the exact same skill set that I taught when I was doing mortise and tenon joints next door, as I am now in the engineering classroom, teaching 2 sets of moving cogs, or a wheel going onto a bicycle, or whatever it is. I'm teaching tolerances, and I'm teaching cutting, I'm teaching accuracy, I'm teaching all the same skill sets, but I'm teaching in a different way. And I think that's what we need to look at, because what I'm finding is when my year 10s get into the classroom, when they start to pick up the tools, more so, year 9s do a bit, but not as much as the 10s. Once they start to get into their trade pathways, which happens at the end, midway through year 9 at our school into year 10, is that their actual understanding of what they need to achieve is that they know that there's a line, they need to stay on one side of it, therefore they cut that side. We don't need to have that explanation anymore, which we used to have 500 times in a lesson. Which side of the line did you cut? Well, I cut the wrong side. Well, what did you cut the wrong side of the line for? Right? I'm not having those conversations anymore, because they're learning that using the software, which, is just a different way of learning the same thing, which is fascinating,
Yeah, and look, they've always got the opportunity to go back to learn those hand skills. Like if they get
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I mean, I explain to the kids, we're currently with one of my year 10 classes, we're making a little dovetail box just because we're reverse engineering it to draw it up on CAD.
Yep.
But I'm not getting them to cut dovetails with a dovetail saw, because I don't have the time. 2, I don't want rubbish products. So I'm using the Gifkin jig, because it still gives them the understanding, it gives them the knowledge and the process of how a dovetail works, but they get a quality product.
Yep, and the engineering skills at the other end, right? And the material skills, because the materials work a particular way. So it always fascinates me to do dovetails. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but if you do it with foam, and then you pull the foam apart, and the foam just explodes, right? It just goes everywhere. But what's the difference between a piece of foam and a piece of timber? It's mind-blowing to a child, right? The timber has structure, right? Whereas foam does not. And they don't see that stuff unless you actually teach them that. So, and again, I go back to, where did I learn that? I threw Condy's crystals in the pool as a science teacher at Boys Town. Did not end well for me, let me tell you. Okay, I blew about, Brother Bill, if you're watching, I'm sorry. But it blew about 18 tiles off the pool. So the next afternoon, I'm emptying the pool and redoing the tiling on the pool, because we threw a little bit too big a chunk of Condy's crystals in there. And, like I said, we all got wet. Let me put it that way. But again, '93 you could do those things. Nowadays you can't, and
Nah.
it's a different world that we kind of teach in. The risk, you'll see me posting all about risk at the moment. Those of you who are on LinkedIn, and I'm doing that very, very strategically. I think risk is doing our departments real damage at the moment, across every school in the country, not just Queensland. I teach, I talk to schools all around the country, and risk is our worst enemy at the moment in terms of skill sets. It's decreasing our skill set at our year 12 exit, by how early we can get kids onto machinery and get kids into spaces that they need to be working in. It's the kind of opposite of the laser cut / 3D printing argument I was using earlier. But if we don't teach kids how to take risk, then they never learn how to take risk safely. And I think that is something that we really need to be all very focused on moving forward over the next 5 years. Otherwise, we may not have a subject to come back to in 5 or 6 years' time. That's something that is really worrying me.
Yeah, look, I'm the same. I've seen the reduction in what students are allowed to do, and look, some things rightly so, but you have those kids who are on the vocational pathway. So in our classroom, they're in year 10, and all they can use is a bandsaw. Yet they go to TAFE the following day, and they're on drop saws, they're on table saws, they're on panel saws, and it's just like they come back to school, and it's just like, sir, but I could use it. I said, look, I get it, and I'm sure you're taught how to use it safely, but however, in a school environment, I just can't let you.
No,
and
that's exactly right. I mean, it's a huge contrast, isn't it? The really interesting, because I'm vet trained, I'm not sure if you're the same, but I taught Cert 2 construction 20 years ago, so how that's changed in 20 years is just astounding to me. I mean, when I was in Logan at St Francis College, we built an entire concrete bridge over a lake, and we built the lake itself with a mini digger. All the kids got their mini digger license, and we got in there over a 3-day period, and we dug out the lake, and then we did the lining, and then we put all the rocks in the rock bed, and then we reverse engineered 2 bridge faces, and then put treated pine sleepers over the top as the bridge floor. And again, look, I look back on that now, and that bridge stood for, it was only knocked down about 5 or 6 years ago, so probably 20 years it was there over the lake. And the kids did, their multi-strand science in that lake. They did, the amount of learning in that space during that 7 or 8 years of that school at St Francis was phenomenal. And every single one of those kids, I had 100% take up on my tradies, 100%. The tradies that were leaving my school, every one of them got a job. And I asked myself the question, is that about me, or is it about the skill sets they had because they could do what they were allowed to do? And the answer to that question, I think, is not about me, right? It's about the fact that the kids were able to get on, practice, learn, do in a safe environment, which meant when they went to site, they were capable of actually achieving tasks for their bosses. And at the end of the day, I had a motto when I was down there: make your boss look good. That was our motto. That's all they had to do, make your boss look good, and they all wore it like across their foreheads. And some of those guys now have got their own gangs of brickies, and they got their own gangs of chippies and whatever else, and they ring me up and they go, oh mate, I've still got the same, my chippies are still using to make me look good, and now they're me, it's not I'm making my boss look good, but my guys have got to make me look good. And I kind of look at that and I go, that's great, because that's a mindset, right? And it's one of those things that I bang on about all the time with all levels of teaching, with my bosses as well, who sometimes get frustrated with me. Sorry, bosses. But is the whole ways of working stuff. It's the concept that we have to do this together. If we're not all doing the ways of working, then the kids aren't going to work that way. And it's one of those things that when we're in a particular space, and we have to do it all together, and we all do it the same way, because that's the way we work here. And it keeps kids safe at the end of the day. that's a
Yeah.
comfort thing, And like you were saying, I've got kids now who are one day a week they're out doing a school-based trade where they're using nail guns and drop saws, and then they come back to school and we go, right, you're making a sawhorse, jump over there. You're doing a 45-degree cut with a handsaw. Like, why are they going to stay at school?
Yeah.
I wouldn't stay at school,
Nah, I'm all of those kids. I'm all about get out of school. Like if you can go, and they're going, we want to go full time. We wanted to, my boss wants me on site full time, but
Yep.
mum and dad said I have to finish school, and I'm just like,
Yep. It's
yeah,
interesting, isn't it? That whole mum and dad thing is a really interesting conversation. And it's not just mum and dads. I've got to say I haven't met too many career counsellors who go, right, you've got to stop coming to school and off you go. Well, because they're employed by the school, right?
yeah.
At the end of the day, that's not necessarily a good thing because, you've got a kid who wants to be out, in the sun, playing with nail guns, playing with drop saws, getting fit,
doing something,
doing stuff, and you're trying to put him in a maths and an English classroom. It's going to end badly for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
The engagement thing is a really interesting one for me as well. We never have problem with kids engaged in our subject, right? And people go, oh, you're so lucky. Well, I don't know that it is luck. We work pretty hard at making sure that every kid has access to what it is we do. And whether they're, year sevens and they're picking up a saw for the first time, or whether they're year 12s using the circular saw for the first time, there's first times in every single class as we go through. And people often talk about coming of age. And one of the ways we work in our department is that we have coming of age in every single year group. We do this in year 7. Can I do that this year? No, we don't do that till year 8. We do this in year 7. We do this in year 8. We do this in year 9. And if you want to be here in 11 and 12, this is what we do in year 11 and 12, right? And I think that's really important. They can go through them faster, and then they have to go and do something else though. Yeah, so they have to learn another set of skills. And that's why I brought aviation on, is because we had kids who were getting through so fast. They wanted to do, and I said, well, do that, finish it, then you can do aviation. And then, we've got the aviation course now as well, which is great.
Yeah, it sounds like, that you're in there and you're showing these kids that you have the ability to achieve, that you can do it. And I expect this level. And then next year I'm going to expect a little bit higher, and the following year a little bit higher. And anyone who's been teaching more than sort of 5 minutes knows that kids will rise or fall to the expectation level that's put there. So if you expect nothing from them, they're going to give you nothing. If you expect a high level, then they're going to do their damnedest to hit that level. And
I think the rigor stuff doesn't just work from that though. It works across their behaviour, it works across their attitude, it works across all those things, Like we were talking about the kids who might be a bit distracted. One of the conversations I've often had with those kids who are really, really could go to trade straight away, but they're not mature enough, right?
Yeah.
So the conversation I have with them about rigor is, well, you know what? If you rocked up with that attitude to your boss on site, how would he go with that? Oh, he probably wouldn't accept that. Well, let's set the bar a bit higher and let's see if you can achieve that for the next 6 lessons you walk in here. I want you to walk in with your shirt tucked in. I want you to walk in here with a good attitude. I want you to not come in here and annoy your peers. I want you to walk in here, get on with your work. Get the tools out, get the workshop set up. That's your job because you know what to do. You're just choosing not to do it. And that's not the same. Yeah. So what I want from their rigor is I want their engagement rigor up. I don't want their skill level up because their skill level is already high enough, right? But their engagement level needs to come up, or their social skill ability in that needs to come up. And they're the rigor things that I think are really important, and we don't often talk about them. They're not things we talk about often.
No, and they're the ones where you've probably had similar conversations where you're about to get a new student, or you got that you got to watch out for Billy Blogs, and I'm just like, don't tell me about Billy Blogs, because 9 times out of 10, if he's a rat bag for you in English, maths, or science, he's going to be a rock star for me, because he or she, because they come into the classroom and they're doing stuff and they're making, and they're allowed to move, and they're allowed to talk, and they're allowed to question what is happening. And they love the why. Just why is this? Why do I have to do it this way? Why do I have to do it that way? What is this material? And instead of just going, because that's the way it is, it's just like, well, you explain, and they get this knowledge, and they get this information, and they get their understanding, more importantly. And then they go, oh, brilliant. Because I've got a bunch of lads in, one of my Year 12 industrial classes, and they are ratbag kids, but they're great. But they don't want to be at school.
No.
And if I keep them busy, they're angels. As soon as they get that slightly, a little bit bored, or there's a choke point in the project, I got my work cut out for me that lesson.
But it's not about the kids, though, is it? Right? And that's what. And this is the thing, right? And I often say this. Well, I've got one very young teacher, and we've got a brand new teacher's aide at the moment. I'm spending a lot of time having these sorts of conversations with them about set your expectations for your kids by the tasks you set them. And if you don't set the task well enough, you will not. Because the reality of it is the engagement will drop. If the engagement drops, your task hasn't been set well enough. And I use the same scale myself. I never walk out of a classroom without judging what I've done, because I know that if the engagement level dropped at any point in any class, whether it's 31 year 5s or 4 year 11s or 12s, which is 2 of the classes I've got this year, I know that my teaching, right, well, not my teaching, but the way in which I set that task needs to change a little bit next time I do it. And I make all those tweaks as I'm going. And I think, that's just part of what good teaching is. I think, the ability for you to sit back and analyze that. And I guess, 30 odd years of it makes you good at it, right? People say to me, oh, how did you pick up that kid wasn't feeling well before they even got to your door? And I go, well, I've dealt with probably 1 million kids in 35 years. It's not.
You pick up on it. You can
intuitive.
see it.
Yeah,
and if you have that relationship, you can see it.
Yeah. It's important that and I think it's important that young teachers see that, because and that's one of the conversations I have with a lot of universities is that I really want to see their students more. I would absolutely love to, and you've probably seen me post this on LinkedIn. I think one of the ways of solving our teaching crisis is actually to have apprentice teaching again. I would love to see apprentice teaching. I think it's the way to solve the problem. If I had a first-year teacher in my classroom every day, I would absolutely love it. And it would be great for the kids, because the first thing they're going to do is to learn how to do relationships. And they will see me doing all this stuff rather than trying to teach someone how to do it. They see it in action and see the value of and that's the hard bit about what we do is it's very hard to teach someone that in a classroom. Like teaching teachers, I think, is one of the hardest things you can do on the face of the planet, because every single teacher is slightly different. The way they are going to apply a technique is slightly different to the way I would apply that technique. It doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it different to the way I would do it. And I think they're conversations which you can only have one-to-one. And it's like feedback in the classroom. No one likes having their boss staring over their shoulder, do they? But after a class, having your next door teacher come in, or even during a class, chew one of your kids out, and then go back inside. Then after class, have a debrief about why that happened. That's a whole thing entirely. And we've got where we are at the moment, we have a rule that if anyone sees anyone misbehave behind their back, their job is to walk in and grab them and chip them, right? Because it's a way of working. It's a way for us to have conversations about professional practice. it's also a way of picking up kids' lack of respect and getting them to understand the concept of what respect is to a team. And we are a team, and we're evidencing that teamwork if we work together. If we're not working together, it's that whole adage that, as a year coordinator, I used to say to all my staff, if you walk past a paper on the ground, you've just given permission for every other kid to drop them. Not just not pick it up, but to drop them, I still stick by that. It's been 10 years since I've been up, but I will not, when I walk into school every morning, every paper I walk over the top of on my way in, I will pick up. Why will I pick it up? Just in case someone's watching. Because at the end of the day, whether it's a kid or whether it's the principal, it's the right thing to do. And I'm a bit the same when I go for my walk on the beach in the morning, if I'm honest. It doesn't mean I have to have my badge on my shirt. It's just, part of what we do.
It's about showing integrity.
Exactly. And, I'm the same at the supermarket as I am at the school, and the kids run into you. People often say to me, "Oh, don't you hate working where you live?" And I go, "No, it's actually kind of nice." I had a year 12 student offer to bloody carry some groceries to the car for me one day, and I kind of went, "Man, am I getting that old?" But it was quite lovely. I said no, but the reality of it is it's a nice thing to be in a community where that stuff happens, and it fills you with hope that, if there's an old lady crossing the road, that one of our kids will get out there and hold the car up and allow them to cross the road, and I think some of that stuff is in some ways more important than, whether you can cut a piece of timber or not, so.
Without a doubt. Without it, every day of the week, if we can help raise these young men and women, these children, into adults with or help raise them to adults with integrity who know what's right, who will help the ones who need helping, and will look at others above themselves, then who cares if they got an A, B, or C?
Yeah. And also question, right? Is the other thing I want my kids to do is question stuff. The generation of kids that, I was a questioner when I was at school, but I was also expelled from multiple schools because I questioned regularly, right? So the questioning thing was never a huge thing through the 70s, 80s, 90s. We started to get to it by the end of the 2000s, but now I hope we're at a point where kids are empowered enough to go, you know what? Why are we doing this? And that no one says, don't ask why, just do it. I hope those days are gone, because I want kids who ask why. Everything relies on it. The fact that, I want my kids riding to school in teams of kids riding their bikes to school. And if someone pulls over in a van, they all stop together and go, hang on, something's not right. Let's stick together, right? If they're online and someone says something, why is this happening? Let's bug out. It's the little bit of their brain that triggers and goes, something's not right here. Ask the why. And we're not going to have kids getting bullied online and all that stuff that happens and bullied in the streets and bullied in the playground if they are prepared to stand up and go, what's going on and why is this happening collectively? And I think that as a movement is something which I think is really important, and I think we're getting there. It's a slow battle, but we are starting to head in the right direction. But, we need to try. There's a few things that are probably sitting in their way, and I think one of them is the whole mobile phone issue. It's still a massive issue for lots of people. I'm not sure that it is as big an issue as people think it is. I've taught at schools with mobile phones, and I've taught at schools without mobile phones, and I've got to tell you, absolutely no difference between the two in my classroom. Now, whether that's because it's my classroom, I can't answer that question. Some people have said that to me, quite bluntly. You've got great classroom control, and therefore you're not going to have a problem with mobile phones. Well, does that mean we judge the mobile phones for the fact that teachers don't have great classroom control? Or do we teach our teachers better and have them, we need to look at the structures that we are employing to do the tasks we're asking it to do. And I think the big picture stuff I think about regularly is I guess, the stuff that causes me a bit of a headache as I'm getting old, Phil. And I think they're the things that, the risk and the lack of teachers or quality teachers that we're getting in particularly our classroom areas across the state and across
Yeah.
national. The fact that we've got teachers who are being asked to take over departments who aren't even manual arts teachers in some of our state schools just horrifies me. I don't know if you're at the last QMATA meeting, but there was a massive shindig there where a lady who was an art teacher had been given the manual arts department and told she was now head of the department and she had to manage it.
Yeah.
My wrist brain went, what?
Yeah. They might be creative subjects, but they're worlds apart. Like I've taught in both, and I really battle because I love teaching design. I love teaching the industrial subjects.
Yeah, me too.
And I would love to be able to teach teachers. However, I've spent all my career working, not studying. So, I'd love to give back, but for me to do that, I've got to go back and do some more study. That's a whole other conversation. If I worked as a labourer for 5, 6, 7 years, and I could prove that I did everything a tradesman did, I could get RPL, and I could actually start training people again. But as an educator, I'll leave it there.
Well, I would argue, Phil, the reason I'm so big on the apprenticeship scheme for teaching is exactly what you just said. Is that I am way happier having a teacher like myself, or I could list teachers in the state who I would suggest should be teachers who should be teaching other teachers. Yeah. And I think that's the critical point we have to get to, is we have to firstly identify who our lead. I mean, we've been labeling lead 2 teachers for how long's Atzel been I mean, I was a lead 2 teacher while the app was on my phone, and then they deleted the app and I lost all of my data. So that's how long I've been a lead 2 teacher, right? So I refused to be a lead 2 teacher anymore because I had to redo all the data that I spent, 5 years collecting and taking photos and videos and all this stuff. That was while I was in St. Francis doing those bridge projects, actually. And I did all that, and then they just deleted it all and told me I had to start again. And I just went, you talk about the RPL process, it's a huge amount of work. And I've done it for vet, and I've done it for teaching, and I've done it for, and now I'm with Catholic Education, and BCE has asked me to do the same thing. So I've just said, look, I'll go lead 1 because you're not going to make me do 15 hours of work that I have to do over and above my teaching load in order to get lead 2. So I'll take a pay cut. I'll do lead 1, which then puts me in a position where I can go, well, now I don't actually have to teach extracurricular. I don't have to, because you're not paying me what I should be being paid. And you see there's a social contract in that, right? And that leads to a really difficult conversation. And I'm brave enough to have it on air with you, but the reality of it is, I think there's some real interesting conversations which need to happen across our education system at the top end, where we've got teachers who are leaving to start companies who we should be hiring in our schools to teach our staff. Instead, we're hiring them back as experts to teach STEM. I'm lost by that. I don't understand the logic. Please explain. It just it's gobsmacking to me.
Yeah, well, to wind back to right at the start of our conversation, you talk about the key tag.
Yeah.
And we're either 3D printing or laser cutting, but the math, science, engineering, and if we go STEAM, we go art.
Yep.
The technology is it's all there because we're teaching them the science of materials. We're teaching them. We're using technology. We're using the engineering. We're being creative. So we've got the art. We're using math because they've got to work out, okay, how long is this going to take? How big is it going to be? What's the volume? Yet we're And look, it's been a bugbear of mine. I understand why STEM and STEAM have been pushed so much,
Yeah,
but I get a little bit frustrated because as a veteran design technology teacher, that's what I've been doing since day one.
absolutely.
And so,
Yeah, look,
look,
it's a great point. It's a great point to finish on. Well, I mean, we've managed. I can't believe we've been talking for an hour. I just looked up at the clock and went, "Holy!" Anyway, I thought, what are we going to talk about for an hour? But anyway, we've managed to get through it. But it's a great kind of thing to finish on. I think is that concept of, how valuable. And I did spend a bit of time at Victory College when I was up there. The principal went, "I'm going to give you some time and space. I want you to write a STEM course for year 7 to 10." And it was brilliant because what we ended up doing was it became our digital technologies and our all got round into one, and we ended up with a lot more time because then it became the basis of how we connected everything else onto it. So our English, our maths, and our science and everything connected to our STEM course, which all started to make sense. But in a school of 350 kids, it was great. But when you start talking about 1,200 to 1,300, 1,400 kids,
it gets a little bit trickier.
It gets pretty difficult because you've got for anywhere from 4 to 6 strands of mainstream classes that you've got to then teach the teachers about what the connection is and how that works every term and what that might look like. So it's a fascinating thing, but look, it's something that I think is a positive for the future. I think STEM will eventuate. I think sadly I can see STEM replacing what we do, which not what I want to see, Phil, but and not where I want to end the conversation. But look, it is like I said, we need to watch the risk conversations over the next little while, and we need to make sure that we're fighting the good fight in terms of those things. And thanks for inviting me on to have a bit of a chat. I've really enjoyed it.
Hey, Mark, it's been my pleasure. Now, I've just got to ask you I've got to ask you one question, definitely, before we go. Like, I reckon we could probably talk for another hour at least. But, look, I respect your time and, we both got school tomorrow. But one question I have to ask you, because it's the Tattoo Teacher podcast, do you have any tattoos?
No, I don't. I don't have any. I'm clean. I'm a clean man. I'm a cleansed human. I did play rugby for many, many years, but never actually had any tattoos. So there you go.
I'm going to have to go back through the end of every conversation I've had with my guests, but I think I'm at the tipping point where there's more untattooed teachers than tattooed teachers at this point in time.
There you go. Oh well, I'd love to be the one that just tipped it over the edge. Hey,
I'll have to double check.
Now I'm going to have to make you count, Phil. Hey?
Oh no! Well, hey, we can't count. We're just the cutties and stickies, aren't we?
That's right. No counting for us, mate. No counting in literacy.
Exactly. Hey, right, Mark, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it.
No worries.
And you have a good, we've got about 3 weeks of term left. So
3 weeks to go. Yeah, I'm off fishing on the holidays, so I can't wait to get there. I'm going up to Swains for 7 days, so I'll send you some pickies.
Mate, enjoy.
Thanks, Phil. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, it would mean so much to me if you could either like, follow, and subscribe to whatever platform you are listening on. The music was by DJ Fruit Salad. Thanks again for listening. Stay cool. Be blessed.